Hi everyone, welcome to episode 133 of A Stitch in Time. Today is Thursday, March 19th, 2020, the first day of spring here in the Northern Hemisphere. My name is Carol. I am known as Knitsnpurls on Ravelry, and I'm coming to you from my home in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, just over an hour's drive east of Vancouver. If this is your first time watching, hello, welcome. Thanks so much for checking out the podcast. I hope you like what you see and that you'll be back. And if you are a returning viewer, welcome back. Thanks so much for coming by once again to spend some time with me. A special thank you, a huge thank you to all of you who reached out this past week. I always love hearing from you, but I think it was especially appreciated this past week, considering how much has changed and how much we've gone through in just over a week since the last time I spoke to you. On the surface, our world looks very much the same, but life as we know it has changed profoundly. And I think we're all feeling the effects of that. I think that's safe to say. More about that later. Let's focus on more positive things for the time being. How does that sound? Today is the first day of spring, and I have pulled out my dandelion mug out of the cupboard, and I'm going to put this back into regular use. Up until yesterday, I've still been using winter themed and even Christmas themed cups. So with the new season, I thought it was time to make the shift. It was about time. Nothing too fancy in here this afternoon, just orange pekoe. But that's good. It's a classic. It's a good old faithful. No complaints here. True confessions, I have recorded and re-recorded the beginning of this podcast a number of times. Having a tough time getting my groove today, but I'm determined to get an episode out today, so bear with me if there's a little stumbling over my words or forgetting what I was going to say. I think it's just important just to carry on. So let's start with works in progress. I have two pairs of socks that I've been working on and that you've seen before. So let's start with those, shall we? I was really hoping this project was going to be finished this week, but I got distracted. What else is new, right? This is the first of a pair of the Sailing School Socks by Helen Stewart. This is from her Handmade Sock Society 2 collection. I started this pair last October. Kind of petered out on it with Christmas knitting and such, and picked it up again in the new year. It is being knit from Tanis Fiber Arts Blue Label. Whoops, the sun is shining on that. The sun is shining on that. Isn't that wonderful? There you go. It's an 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon, fingering weight yarn, and this is in the shadow colorway. Give you a little look at the label here. As you can see, it's more or less a plain stockinette sock with a 1x1 twisted rib cuff, but there is this lovely column of stitches that runs down. In this case, this is the right sock, so this runs down the right side of the cuff and foot. And so I think I showed you this one finished last week, and I think last week I had just cast on the second sock and knit about half of the ribbing. And I actually went quite gung-ho. There's the yarn in the skein. I was quite gung-ho, and I finished up the leg of this one very quickly and did the heel right away. And then petered out on the gusset, picked it up again, and have done pretty well since then. I'd really, really like to have these done by next week. It's not that I don't like the pattern, it's not that I'm not enjoying the knit, it's just, it's been on the go for far too long and I'm ready to move on to something else. I still have one pair from this collection to knit, and there's one pair that's been released from the Sock Society 3 already, and the second pattern for that is being released next week. So I am falling woefully behind. Not that I have any delusions of catching up, but I'm kind of feeling the pressure to just like get cracking on this and get on with the next one. And I don't like it when projects take on that sense of let's just get it done, you know? I want to enjoy my knitting. I also have another pair of socks that I'm knitting out of this yarn. It is from Biscot Yarns, and it's the Bis Sock Base, and the colorway is Mon Pays c'est l'hiver. My country, it is winter. Only it's not winter anymore. And here we go. I am almost at the point where it's time to do the toe. Just another inch or so, maybe inch and a half, and I'll be ready to do the toe shaping. So this is the first sock. 64 stitch, 2x2 ribbing in the cuff, top down, traditional heel flap and gusset. As I mentioned last week, I did the heel flap twice. I took it out, added in this next white stripe, and I really like how the coloring worked out on the heel flap, the little heel turn, and then picked up again with the red. So I like how those are coming along. Part of me is tempted to put these, you know, finish this sock and then put the yarn away till next fall maybe, considering that winter's over, but it's probably not a good idea. One is I don't want to lose steam. The other is that sometimes when you knit, say 2 sleeves or 2 socks, quite a distance of time apart, your gauge can be quite different, so I probably should just carry on. I think it's just I'm ready to cast on some new things. I'm getting restless with some of my older projects, but I shall carry on because I really do love this yarn, love the sock, love the feel of it. Like this project, I love everything about. So it's not like it's a hardship to keep working on it at all. So what has been taking my attention away from these socks is some design. So it's been a while since we've had a dabbling in design segment. So I'm happy to include one in today's episode. I'm going to talk a little bit, okay, first I will say, for those of you who have not been watching, a couple of weeks ago, I purchased a Party of 5 mini skein set from Sweet Georgia Yarns. I had been watching the Sweet Georgia podcast, and Felicia Lowe, the owner, had presented the spring collection of yarns. And one of the items was this Party of 5 set called Tofino Road Trip. Tofino is a small town on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And my husband and I have been there, I've kind of lost track. I'm not sure if it's 3 or 4 or 4 or 5 times, somewhere around that. We've always gone somewhere around New Year's and spent some time in the vicinity, either close to Tofino or further south in Ucluelet, which is another little town. And so when I saw this yarn set, I just knew that I needed to own it, and I was really inspired to design something with it. So I'll show you the different yarns that came in it to start off with. So forgive me, I'm losing some stitches. Hang on. That will never do. I'm mid knitting, so got balls and partly used balls. So the first color was Bison. Then there is, you can see not much left here, Seagrass, this beautiful yellowy green. Golden Hour. Birch. And then Surf Shack. It's very beachy kind of colors. So I'm going to put these back in my Ziploc. That keeps them from falling on the floor and rolling around as they hang from my project. So my first step, well, first of all, I had to decide what I wanted to knit. My first thought was doing a cowl, and then I settled on doing a shawlette, scarf slash shawlette. There's just shy of 150 grams of yarn in a party of 5 set, so it's not a large shawl by any means, but certainly enough for a little scarfy shawl or shawlette, which is the size I prefer anyway. That's the size of shawl I use the most. Kind of use it as a scarf. So my first step was to go through my stitch dictionaries and look for pattern stitches that reminded me or were named for waves, seagulls, seashells, trying to think what else. Stitch patterns that had movement, like waves or curvy lines that would suggest a curvy road, or the waves of the ocean. And then I grabbed just a couple of scrap yarns from my sock yarn scrap stash, and I just started knitting little swatches. Like I knit this long swatch because I would just do a design for a little bit, increase or decrease the number of stitches I needed for the repeat, and just carried on. So I just knit and knit and knit on this and tried out different stitches and tried out different, like tweaking them in different ways. So this one I used the contrast in between the wavy bits. Here I juxtaposed the one solid color with the other solid color. This was a seagull, a gull stitch that actually had columns of these gulls, I guess, just going up, and it kind of made the kind of just went in columns where I offset them. And then here I tried it by knitting this middle color in the brown instead of the gold, this was sort of similar to how the pattern was presented in the stitch dictionary. This I mixed it up. This is just some garter stitch in various forms. Did another kind of ripple pattern, shell pattern, this kind of eyelet pattern. As you can see, I just tried out all sorts of different things and tweaked them. And what I came across at some point was this pattern. And I can't remember what it's called. And I couldn't tell you off the top of my head which stitch dictionary it came out of. But what I liked about it was that it had movement. These waves could represent the curvy road or the waves of the ocean. And there was like this little shell stitch here, but then also this is like a scallop, so like a scallop shell. And I decided this was the stitch that I wanted to include in my design. And so I started knitting. I started knitting an asymmetrical triangular shawl. And I looked at a number of different shawls that I had knit, got a sense of how to begin, the different ways you could do increases and decreases, and I ended up with a shawl that basically had a straight line on one edge and gradually increased that way. And I ordered the yarns in a different order than they appeared in the packaging, and tried out my idea of incorporating that stitch pattern with each color change. And so I got a sense of how far the yarn would go. I got a sense of how the colors looked together, got a sense of how the stitch pattern would work, etc., etc. When I got really close to the end, I realized it wasn't quite what I was looking for. What I decided I really wanted was to have the shawl have, there's one pattern I had knit, the Aurora shawl by Helen Stewart, that had a curve to the top and kind of a biasing of the stitch pattern. And what I learned is that even though, like the other patterns that I was using as guidelines, you increased once every 2 rows, what happened on this pattern is on one of the rows you increase at the beginning and decrease at the end, and then you increase at the same, you increase 1 stitch the following row. So you're still only increasing 1 overall over 2 rows, but it gives it that other shape. And I also decided that I wanted to go back to the color order that the skeins were originally arranged in, for a number of reasons. But I figure that partly that they were put in that order for a reason, and considering that working with color is Sweet Georgia's forte, who am I to question the order that they came in? And so I began again. I took out back what I had done and started again. And originally, with my first color, I knit the whole skein, and then I transitioned into the next color by working the stitch pattern like this, or I guess like that is a better way to show you. So I did, before I changed, I did 2 rows of garter in the new color, worked 1 repeat of the shell pattern, and then switched to the new color. And then I decided what I wanted to do is, with each color repeat, I wanted to add an additional repeat of the pattern. So there you can see I've done 2 repeats there, and I've just finished the 3rd repeat of the 3rd transition. What I also decided is, even though I had started in the original shawl, I had used up the whole skein of the first color before I transitioned. In this case, I decided to begin with it, but what I am going to do is incorporate it at the end with the blue, so that the shawl will begin and end with the same color. I just want to lose my yarn off my lap. There you go. So what I still have to do is garter stitch in the white. Then I will do 4 repeats of the shell pattern striped with the blue. Then pretty well almost right after that I will be a few rows of garter, and then I will start the blue shells striped with the brown and end with the brown. That's my vision. I am really glad I switched the shape. I really like the way this is on an angle. I like the way that this particular construction adds a lot of length. Even without finishing it, like I'm 5'3", so stretching out, my left arm is stretched all the way out, and you can see that by the time I'm done, I should have at least a wingspan or arm spans worth of length on it. And that gives lots of length to, you know, wrap it around your neck like this, which is how I like to wear this type of shawl. So pretty happy with it so far. It's proved to be a little bit trickier the second time around in some ways because of the way that the shape is constructed, because you are increasing and then decreasing on one row and then increasing again at the end of the second row or at the top. Your stitches are constantly shifting, and so every time I start a new pattern row, I need to make sure I'm starting with the right stitches in the pattern so that the seashells and scallops line up, and also that they line up from this stripe to this stripe, for instance, this color change to that color change. Also, the pattern's a little bit challenging because unlike a lot of lace patterns or a lot of stitch patterns, I guess it's a lace pattern, has eyelets, unlike a lot of lace patterns where within a single row you will knit as many decreases as you need to balance the what did I say? In most lace patterns, the number of increases and the number of decreases are the same, and they counterbalance each other. So for every yarn over, there is a knit two together or an SSK or something to then have the numbers turn out, the same. At the end of the row, you'll have the same number of stitches as the row before. Where this one, the stitch pattern is such that you increase on the first row and you don't decrease all of those stitches again until the fourth row of the pattern. So that's proved a little bit tricky too, to make sure it all balances out. Anyway, it's been fun. It's stretched my brain muscle or exercised my brain, so that's good. And for the most part, something else that I thought about is if I was going to sort of knit this inspired by the name Tofino Road Trip, I wanted it to be the kind of project you could take on a road trip. So there's lots of garter stitch, and the lace, despite how I'm describing it, is not difficult at all. It's very intuitive, very rhythmic, and so that was sort of my idea, is that not only did I want it to reflect the colorway name, I wanted it to be something you could work on a road trip. So there you go. No guarantees that this will be the final iteration. I'm always a little bit hesitant to show my designs in progress because I never know for certain if it's going to be what they look like in the end or not. It's kind of like there's a little bit of risk or a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? You're putting yourself out there and opening yourself to criticism. And what if everyone hates it? Or, it just makes me a little bit shy to share what I'm doing. It's one thing to knit someone else's pattern and just you're making it your own by your color choices, etc. But this is, I guess a little bit of my heart and soul. So I have to say I feel a little vulnerable. Maybe that's the right way to put it, showing it to you before it's all finished. Because that may not work out that way. We'll see. Just a real quick, I'll just lean here, grab my books. Just a real quick recap of what I've been reading. I finished Cat Among the Pigeons and by Agatha Christie, and have continued on to The Adventure of the Christmas Pudding. This is a collection of short stories. This is a book I've read numerous times before. Interestingly, you always would think, well, if you've read it that often, you'll remember who done it. And the truth is, a lot of the times I don't. But I am drawing ever nearer to the end of my Agatha Christie collection in order of publication. We're now, I think, into like early 60s. Yeah, this is 1960. This one was published. So we've come a long way, and it's interesting to hear things like clothes being described. And it's no longer the really old-fashioned clothing and mannerisms and customs of, you know, the 30s and 40s and 50s. So that's kind of interesting too. Okay, let's talk. How are you doing? You okay? Hopefully you are all healthy. Are you like me and I have a little bit of what I would say is either a bit of a mild cold or seasonal allergies, although I don't normally get seasonal allergies, but I've had a bit of a sniffles and touch of a sore throat once in a while, or, you know, very mild cold-like symptoms. And I don't believe I have COVID-19, but I'm checking my temperature. I'm trying to, you know, keep away from people and all that, and it's made me think about a sneeze or a runny nose in a whole new way. Yeah, life has changed. I think it hit me last Thursday. I'd gone to curling, and when I was there, I learned that the Women's World Curling Championships, which were to be held in Prince George, British Columbia, in a few weeks, had been canceled. And my first thought was, oh, because my niece and my mom were going to go up and see the finals, had arranged that. And I remember my first reaction was feeling disappointed that my mom wouldn't get to go and see it, because she just loves to watch curling. And then my second thought was, wow, they must feel to be taking this very seriously if they're going to cancel it. And then over the course of that evening, we went out and curled, and then we were having dinner, and the TV was on in the restaurant area, and you know, things kept coming up. This was canceled. This was canceled. This was canceled. And then you sort of realized, wow, when these large sporting events, large revenue producing events are being canceled, you know it's serious. And then I had been considering going to Fibers West last Friday or Saturday. And as it turned out, the decision was taken from me because that too was canceled. And then as it turned out, my husband's car needed work on it. So it was in the shop Friday and Saturday, and he took my car to work, and he ended up having to work Saturday. And so I wouldn't have been able to go anyway. But even so, it was very sobering to think, wow, you know, the idea that, again, more events. And then it just seemed like event after event after event. And then a lot more out there about, you know, we have a new vernacular, you know, social distancing and self-isolation, and words we'd never really heard before, thought about before. My husband's been dealing with a lot of these things at work. He's a regional manager for his company, so there's been numerous conference calls, and everything keeps changing because the whole situation is very fluid. And so he's worked long hours. He's currently covering for one of his managers who was out of the country and is now in self-isolation. The kids were on spring break this week and next week anyway, but now school's been canceled indefinitely. So of course, people are, you know, working moms and dads are dealing with that, and yeah, it's just a very strange thing. And the just the idea of learning to think in a new way, that, you know, we have been, our generation and our children, and their children, we didn't live through a war. So, you know, my mom and dad and my husband's parents, they dealt with things like rations and curfews and things like that. We've had so much freedom, and now we're getting a taste of what it's like to have some of those freedoms restricted. For kind of, I wouldn't say I'm a complete introvert. I think I'm kind of in the middle. I'm not one extreme or the other, but, you know, the idea of being at home is not that terrible to me. I have lots to do at home. My daily routine really hasn't changed much because I no longer work outside the home, and so I don't leave the home in the daytime a whole lot anyway, unless I'm running some errands or going to curling. So curling's canceled. It was our last week coming up, or today would have been our last night anyway. Ball season's supposed to start in a couple weeks. That likely won't happen. But, you know, so in some ways it's not so very different for me or so bad, but it's the idea that if you want to go somewhere, you got to think twice about it. And if you have a bit of a sore throat or a bit of a runny nose, like, you got to stay home. Like, there's, and it's interesting to see the different reactions and how seriously or not they're taking it. And of course, as things get worse, people start to clue in. So it's just been a very strange time. I said somewhere, like, the only certainty right now is uncertainty, because we just don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I have a sister that's now working from home. One of my sons is now working from home. My other son is most likely, the shop he works at is going to get closed next week, and so he'll be going on employment insurance. We call it EI here. My daughter is a pharmacy assistant, so she'll continue working. She works part-time as it is anyway, and her shifts are mostly timed around her husband's shift, so that they don't need a lot of childcare and such, and that will likely continue. I have a niece who has been in Australia, was not scheduled to come back until October. She is now booked on a flight coming home on Saturday. Too many uncertainties as far as health insurance and the situation there, and all that. I know my sister and her husband will feel a whole lot better with her closer to home. When she returns, she needs to go into self-isolation for 2 weeks, and she'll be staying at their house. They will be doing that alongside her. So just lots of, I think it's touched all of us in one way or another. The crazy hoarding that people have been doing, that one I just find both a little bit confusing, as in how many rolls of toilet paper does one family really need, and the idea of, wow, you're definitely not thinking about the customer coming in after you who might truly need that product that you've just taken way more than you can use in 6 months' time. That's my 2 cents there. But we shall get through this. There was something I saw on Facebook yesterday, I think it was a meme, that sort of talked about, you know, compared to what we're being asked to do with self-isolation and social distancing is very mild compared to what our parents and or grandparents, uncles, aunts, etc. needed to do, you know, going off to fight in a war, for instance. We can do this. It's just that we're kind of spoiled. We've never had to restrict our movement to that degree ever before. And it's learning, it's the new normal, right? The learning to be more conscious of things like washing your hands, coming into contact with people, all of those things. But we will get through it. I have been, well, yesterday was my birthday. That's why I didn't record. I thought I was gonna take the day off, have a really lazy day, which I did. I had a few messages from some of you viewers. Thank you so much for your happy birthday wishes. So I had a lazy day. We did not go out to eat as we normally would have. We ordered dinner in. Had tons of messages from friends and family over, Facebook and texts and stuff, and talked to kids and all that. But yeah, it just felt a little bit strange. But that was okay. It's okay. We don't usually make a big deal out of our birthdays anyway, and I probably, except for probably going out for dinner, I probably would have spent it much the same way anyway, truth be told. I had a couple of lovely surprises that came in the mail this week from viewers. I won't name names. I always forget to ask people if it's okay, and then I just figure I just won't. Look at this beautiful little card. I asked the person if she had made it, and then she mentioned that the person who made its name was on the cellophane, and I had set that aside and had misplaced it, so I didn't realize it. It's hand knit by Sandra in the Texas Hill Country. That's sweet though. And then she had a little quote by Elizabeth Zimmerman. Really, all you need to become a good knitter is wool, needles, hands, and slightly below average intelligence. She had these really cute little stitch markers, which I'm anxious to try, but wanted to keep on the cards till I showed them to you. They are from Heidi and Lana. You can see that down here, I guess. So see how cool they are? They're like a little ring, but the bead is kind of, let's see if I can do this, separate one off. That's how the bead is. The wire goes through the bead so that they dangle, but they don't like dangle too much. It shouldn't get caught on things. I really love this design. I'm anxious to try them out. And then she made this little card holder for, I figure I could put cards in it, but also she's put quilt patterns, including a pattern for this, is that the right one? Yeah, including a pattern for this little case. So this design, you could do all sorts of things and adjust it in all sorts of ways. My mom loves to, she writes letters all the time, and it would be kind of a neat thing to enlarge it and put note paper and envelopes in it, for instance. So that was such a unexpected, well, I guess all surprises are unexpected, but such a delightful surprise to receive. And then I also got another birthday card just this afternoon from a viewer. So you know who you are. I've already thanked both of you. So thank you. You guys, like I said, especially this week with everything being so strange and having such a low-key birthday, more so than usual, really helped to brighten my week. So thank you to both of you for that. And something good, I was thinking it's the first day of spring, and that's good. It's official at 8:49 this evening where I live. We've had some beautiful sunny weather the last few days, although they were preceded by, or it was preceded by some really cold, windy days, similar to what we get in the middle of the winter with the Arctic outflow, only not quite that cold, but very strong winds that blew for a few days. I guess maybe winter's last gasp, maybe, hopefully. But it is nice to see. I have a few daffodils that are just starting to bloom now. You can see some of the buds coming out on trees, things like that. So spring is springing. I think everyone's happy to see the blue sky and the sunshine, and the mountains look really beautiful with the white snow and the blue sky behind them and are around them and sun shining on them. So I know a few weeks ago I said I wasn't sure if I was really ready for spring to arrive, but now that it's here, I have to say I'm happy to see it. And I think it will, the warmer weather and gives you a little more freedom to go outside. I think that will hopefully lift people's spirits as we deal with this just extraordinary circumstances that we find ourselves in. And of course, if you are in the Southern Hemisphere, I didn't forget, this is the first day of autumn for you. So how do you feel about it? Are you ready to let summer go? I know it's been a terrible, terrible year with wildfires down there, so maybe you're just as happy to have things cool down. And if you're a knitter, of course, the cooler weather is always a great time to hunker down with your knitting and crochet and, you know, those types of crafts. So hopefully you don't mind saying goodbye to summer too much. Okay, on that note, I think I will say goodbye for this week. I've sort of toying with the idea of having some sort of knit along during this crazy time. The last few days I've been knitting and not just watching knitting podcasts, but I've had a lot of new podcasts kind of pop up on my feed, and have tried out some new ones. And there definitely seems to be an effort to comfort each other, I guess is the right word, band together in this time. I don't know. I have watched Arne and Carlos in the past. I've watched a few of their tutorials and episodes and things, but they are doing they're quarantined after having been out of the country. So they are in self-isolation for, or I guess true quarantine, because this is like they are mandated to stay inside, pardon me, or stay in their own home for 2 weeks. So they're doing a knit along, and it's been hilarious. They're putting a podcast up every weekday to do with this knit along, and it's been really, really just fun to hear their unscripted conversation and see that style, because normally their episodes are very well produced and very no nonsense. It's, you know, they're quite highly produced, so it's interesting to hear the banter back and forth and stuff. So I've been enjoying that. I'm not knitting. If they're doing a mystery knit along with color work, I'm not partaking in that at all or participating in that at all, but I'm just watching the episodes just because I'm enjoying the back and forth. But yeah, if you're interested in doing some sort of knit along as we sort of see ourselves through this uncertain time, let me know, and I'll also give some thought to it this week and see what I can come up with. Sometimes just coming up with the theme of it or the types of projects we're going to knit is the hard part. Certainly participating in it is not that difficult. So let me know what you think. I will just end by saying, obviously, stay safe, stay healthy, both in body and mind. I think a lot of getting through this is about adopting the right kind of attitude. I confess that a couple nights ago was the first night it actually kept me awake a little bit, worrying about some things, and I think we all have concerns of one sort or another, and so yes, wishing you good health and good spirit, and just all the best as we go through this. So take good care of yourselves and be kind to each other. It's a time to come together and help each other out and be good to each other. So So on that note, goodbye. I will see you in about a week. Take care until then.